Our first panel today is comprised of leading global entrepreneurs who conquered new markets, attracted foreign investment, they recruited top talent, and they forged new partnerships around the world. And I hope that you'll join me in welcoming them to the stage. I'm going to let you know who they are, and then as I introduce them, come on up on stage. Our first guest is our moderator, Melanie Carter, who's the Knowledge Partnership Lead at Export Development Canada. We also have Shingai Manjengwa, who's the founder and CEO of Fireside Analytics, Inc. We have Tim Vasco, the founder and CEO of BlockCerts Blockchain. We have Miriam Lazarte, the CEO of LatAm Startups. We also are hoping that we may have Jen Harper, who's the founder and CEO of Cheekbone Beauty. But Jen is involved in a particularly Toronto moment, and that is she is held up on the QEW. So if she arrives, then we will all welcome her wildly to the stage. But until that point, Melanie, I turn things over to you and to your distinguished panel. Really looking forward to what you have to say.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, everyone. All right, thank you very much for being here. So we only have about 40 minutes, so we'll get things started immediately. And Shingai, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to ask you to tell us about your business and maybe about that moment that made you say, you know, I've got something that's worth putting everything into.
That moment. All right, so Fireside Analytics, Inc. Is a data science education solutions company. So we develop online courses to teach data science to a variety of different audiences. And I'm also a children's book author. I've written a children's book about data science, and there's one coming up about automation and robotics and artificial intelligence.
That'd be good for me, who doesn't have a background. That's fantastic for me.
Yes, so we say children's book, but adults like it as well. So my company started 2015, so we're coming up to the 4th year in December. And at the time that I'm a data scientist by profession, so I've been doing this since 2007. And then at some point, after business school, and actually after coming to a Startup Canada event, shortly after I had moved to Canada 7 years ago, I just started to build that confidence around, hey, maybe I could take the show on the road. So it wasn't a moment, it was a process getting there.
Very good. And what was the moment where you decided that you wanted to go global?
So I think being in the online and the digital age, we have no choice but to go global. I mean, it's an open market out there. So I'm originally from Zimbabwe. I've lived in South Africa. I studied in the United States, and now I live in Canada. So I am a global person. So for me, it was a very natural thing to look at alternative markets besides Canada.
Very good. Tim, I'm going to ask you the same question. So tell us about your company. What was that moment that made you say, I've got this, we need to do something about it? And then how you decided to go global.
Thanks for having me here. This is a real honor to see all these wonderful entrepreneurs out there. Our company is BlockCerts Blockchain, and the moment actually was because of the Canadian Accelerator. So I'd encourage everybody to go check out the CTA, but it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was at the Accelerator program in 2014 in Silicon Valley at the Plug and Play, and I heard this crazy ruckus upstairs, and there was pizza going up the stairs. So I actually went for a piece of pizza. And what happened was up in that room, there was a room about as packed as this with people saying, we're going to bring down the banks. Can anybody guess what that was? Bitcoin, right? So I listened to this, had pizza, of course, had pizza. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. And looked at this, and I looked at blockchain and the technology behind it, and I was just, that was it. That was the moment. I'm like, this is going to change the world. This is the new fabric of the internet. And from that journey, I moved to Boston with the CTA. Microsoft supported us with a really generous grant. And now we're all over the world. We're on probably, I think, 5 continents now. So it's really exciting to be part of that whole evolution of bringing real technology into a new age.
So global was from day one, given what you do.
Well, as Shingai says, you're global the minute you're on the internet. And I think you have to have that perspective. You have to have respect for, where the problems are, what the challenges are we're trying to solve as entrepreneurs. And you have to get out of that mindset of, hey, I'm here in Canada. We've got different issues. We've got different perspectives. And you have to kind of take those blinders off and look at, well, what does this mean when somebody sees me from the other side of the world and the other side of that device that they're on? What do I look like? What does my organization look like? So yeah, I think you're always global.
Thanks, Tim. Miriam, up to you. Tell us a little bit about your company, and if there was that aha moment about, this is an innovative idea, I need to proceed.
Sure. I'm the CEO of LATAM Startups. LATAM Startups is an organization that helps Latin American startups to come here. There are technology companies that actually want to go global. But part of our mission and part of the MOU we have with the City of Toronto is also to help Canadian companies to go to emerging markets. The aha moment actually came before LATAM Startups. I'm an international business professional. I studied at my home country, as Colombia. And then when I was working in Vancouver, I actually work in a technology company in Vancouver Island. We have, I don't know if you guys know, but we have a technology park with 150 companies in Vancouver Island, which is a very small place, but it has a lot of companies that actually are exporting globally. And a part of my work with them was to, kind of find, new ways to enter to emerging markets. And I realized for them, the technology they have was extremely easy to sell in Latin America. And then I started to see the other companies around, and because Canada is so advanced in technology, and in our countries in Latin America, we are kind of early adopters. I realized that, for Canadians, it will be pretty much easy to go there and try to get new customers. This is something that Canadians sometimes they don't realize they have that potential, but that was the aha moment. And after that came a consulting company and then LATAM Startups.
I mean, by default, going global was no question for your company. That's great. So Shingai, I'm going to turn back to you. So you were born global as a company, but was there specific steps that you took to deliberately start excelling outside of Canada?
Yes. So one of the first things that I did was I entered a competition in Poland. Yes. There was a startup competition in Poland, and I was pretty confident in the product that we had, that we could, create these online courses to teach data science globally. So I thought, let's, jump in a plane and go there. So that was my first interaction with the Commissioner Service. Trade Commissioner Service, because I met them at that event. It was the Wolf Summit in Poland, so it brought together VCs and lots of people looking to funders, angel investors, and other startups. And actually, in that competition, Fireside Analytics was it was shortlisted out of 350 startups, right? So we were semi-finalists in a competition, and this was the first time that I decided, let me just go out there and see if there's an appetite for my product. So that was one of the first ways that I decided to go global.
Very good. Tim?
Yes, the first thing I did is look for partnerships. So don't be afraid to get out there and immediately look at where you want to target yourselves. Get on the internet, do the research, find the companies that are actually moving. Look at the countries. Look at the policies in the countries. That's what I did. And I looked really globally at where is infrastructure emerging and what kind of companies, organizations, governments are looking at this new technology and are open to my kind of view of this next evolution in the world. And a really good example of that is we're launching our node in Africa out of Mauritius. And that was an email. Literally, it was an email. You never know what you're going to get if you're just going to be looked at as spam or whatever. But I reached out. Turned out to be a 125-year-old company, about 5,000 employees. They just went public. We're launching our node. We've established a great relationship. I got an airplane, flew down there during a cyclone. So that was interesting. Kind of got rerouted to Mumbai. And same thing in India, started out there. We've now been incorporated there for about 5 years, have our own offices there in Mumbai and Bangalore. And it just, you have to be open to what's out there and let other people be open to you and let the door be wide, wide open. I used open 3 times, but you need to be able to do that. Yeah.
That's an interesting point, right? Being open, being reactive to opportunities coming your way, right? So you mentioned you received an email, a company came in. So you researched them. How did you do your due diligence? How did you know that you were making the right choice in going towards that partnership or opportunity versus a different one?
You never know if you're making the right choice. Start with that. You have to embrace uncertainty. But what you can do is make a logical choice, or you can start with data, like what's happening in the world, where are these kind of tendencies going, what's trending, we use that word, but really it's, if I'm going to be open-minded, then is the place I'm going to be open-minded? Are they going to be looking for and able to hear what I have to say? Often as an entrepreneur, if you're an innovator, you're trying to open people's minds to new ideas and entire markets. You start with people, then you go into entire markets. It's difficult to do. So if you can start with a foundation of, well, what does this search return when I'm looking at these parts of the areas and who's kind of showing up there, I think you're going to be a lot more successful at finding the right targets.
We all know that going global is costly, right? You need some money to back you up and so on. So Miriam, I'm going to ask you this first question about financing. And you have this opportunity. You were going to Latin America, obviously. How do you finance those first operations? How do you finance yourself to be ready to go global?
Well, there are different grants in the market that actually help you to, make the next steps. Is the CanExport, there are different types of grants that you can get in the market. But for me, in particular, I applied to Futurepreneur, and I got a loan from BDC. That it was this low rate loan, and that helped me to do a bold move, I will say, because I decided to quit my job and relocate in Latin America for a year and a half, to just be close to potential partners and to learn better about the startup ecosystem that we have there, and get a closer relationship with also trade commissioners and government and all that. And it was totally worth it. But BDC helped us, and Futurepreneur as well was the first.
Very good. Thank you for that tip. Tim, how did you finance your operations to go global?
That's the hardest thing to do. So I think that what you have to do is again, it's about telling your story. Usually financing comes from home. You have to look at who's going to believe in that story. We did some private equity financing, set up to do some initial financing that way. And actually, I was doing a presentation at a large firm, a private equity firm, and one of the partners, after I did the presentation, said, "Can you stay behind?" And said, "I really think I know what you're trying to say." That's the other thing, is you're always educating people. And that was about a year ago at a company or an organization called the Hillcore Group, and that resulted in a $25 million financing. So again, don't be afraid to tell your story. I mean, that's the biggest thing. Get out there, tell your story. Make
Nail
sure
that
that
pitch,
you know
right?
what it is. Even if you don't have your pitch, don't be afraid. I've tried every pitch in the world. It's hard to do, but get your story out there and don't be afraid to do it. I'm not saying, blast social media every 5 minutes. Don't be Elon Musk, but you can get out there and say, this is what I'm thinking, and show people, and the right people will come along. The universe will help you along if you do that.
Shanghai, what was your experience in terms of financing your global activities?
So 100% agree that the universe will come through. Just got to believe it. I was self-funded for the most part, and those initial trips going to Poland, going to different parts of the world, that was all on my dime. But there was return on investment on that, because when I went to those places, I ended up meeting people that then turned into contracts. And then they say, you know, one of the best forms of funding is sales, because that way any money that comes into the business, you end up reinvesting, and that's what you use for your next trip and your next handshake and your next contract, and then they grow and they grow and they grow. So it's not always the glamorous, you know, Silicon Valley, I raised, you know, X millions of dollars. Sometimes you got to do the grind and put in an initial amount where you're, you know, shaking hands and going to the places yourself and you're funding it. And then hopefully that will convert into contracts that you then use to grow your business.
That's very good.
Yeah, I'd like to support Shanghai on that. One of the biggest things that's going to happen is when you're out there, people are going to say, do you have skin in the game? So just like Shanghai, I didn't just show up and go, hey, give me your money and, you know, and seek private equity. I put a lot of my own effort, a lot of my own money in. It gets scary. You're running through this money. You're going, is this ever going to work? And again, you have to really be focused on your own ROI. Like, don't just crazily throw money at it. The second thing Shanghai said, and these are really important points, is seek contracts. How are you going to monetize? Prove that point. When you're sitting there like I was, and you get that question, hey, would you be interested in us investing? The next question is going to be, how much do you have in, and what's your traction? That's always going to be the question. And if you don't have traction and you don't have an idea of how you're going to monetize this thing, it's just an R&D project, and that's what Shred's for. But beyond that, you're going to have to get your own skin in the game. Be not afraid to, you know, step out there, spend your own money. Your first risk capital is going to be your risk capital, both in time and money. So do that, and you're a lot more believable as an entrepreneur.
So Miriam, money financing is a challenge, so we've heard that. But what other challenge did you face in going global, and how did you navigate those challenges?
There are so many challenges. In between other things, you know the culture of the other country. Like, you know, sometimes it's not about the language barrier. So many people think language barrier may be, you know, one of the challenges, but not always is that. It's like how people behave to, you know, do business with you. Like, learn, you know, what is, how people are doing business in that environment and what they are expecting from, you know, business decisions and, you know, how they are going to proceed, because sometimes they have their own rituals, you know, to go through different business. So I think the most important part is when you go to those countries, don't get into assumptions. And I think that's a challenge, big challenge, because sometimes you think, oh, I've been in this other country, it may be similar, this one, the next one, or, you know, or just, yeah, create assumptions around that. And the only way to do it is perhaps talking with other people from the same country, and, you know, other people that have export or have business in that country, and then they will tell you, you know, better what has been the experience for them. But at the beginning, I think, you know, not knowing, like, how to behave or how to go into another culture is difficult.
Very good, thank you. Tim, about the challenge that you would have faced in going global specifically, and how you overcame those challenges.
I think probably my biggest challenge going global was just me. Right? At the end of the day, it's understanding that you have to reach beyond what I call your bounded rationality. Like this, you know, how can I possibly end up in, or even maybe get into Belarus, where I ended up going to do some blockchain work, or how can I possibly figure out how to do business on another continent in India where there's so many people, and how am I going to find it? So the first thing is you got to get beyond those limits of your rationality and say, well, you know what, if I don't try, I won't be able to do it. Then once you get there, it's back to that culture thing. It's like we all have grown up indoctrinated in how we were educated and things like that. And everybody in the world, I like to look at the world in chunks. Like the reason I went to Eastern Europe is math is a really big deal there, and logic. And that's where all your chess champions come from. So, you know, when you look at that, it makes sense because the blockchain is based a lot on math. And that's why it's such a big community there. When I went to India, I looked at, well, in India, the robust ecosystem there is based on operations. Well, for 40, 50 years, all of those kids grew up with their parents making money building these giant call centers and things that support the world 24/7. So very much every day when I operate something, I need to be a little bit better. And in our culture, and everybody in this room is here as an entrepreneur, we all heard, you can be anything, do anything when you grow up. So we tend to be inventors. You know, we invented this today, and we're going to invent something else tomorrow. So I think you look at the culture in a way of understanding that, get out of your own way, and there's a lot of challenges to it, but get beyond fear, I think, is probably the biggest one.
Is your experience similar in terms of challenges? What would you say was your biggest challenges in going global, and how did you overcome that?
So going global is going global, and if it's a market that you don't know, then that's inherently comes with risk. I will say, being African and going to the African market, it was a little bit easier for me because I had context. But I'll paint the picture. At some point, I decided to do, the first data science conference in Zimbabwe, where I'm originally from. And I thought, I do conferences a lot of the time. That's part of the education model. So went and tried to get this done on the ground in a country that I grew up in and left at like 18, 19 years old. So I thought, no, this is going to be straightforward. It wasn't. By that point, I had been here, so there are things that you don't even think about. I mean, at some point, we put out advertising, and the phone numbers that we put on all the advertising, we printed out thousands of flyers. The government changed the structure of the phone numbers in the country. And then, yes. So it would be super helpful to have somebody on the ground, and that's something that I would say, if you can find partners, and in Canada we're lucky that we do have access to people from all over the world. Try and find those networks and meet people, and if you can get somebody who's on the ground to help you with those types of nuances and details, it really does help to mitigate the risk.
And there is a lot of support in Canada, right? There is a lot of support for startups. So maybe, Miriam, I'll start with you. Maybe there are some tools or resources or support systems that you specifically used. You mentioned the BDC, but are there others that you would want to identify for the group here to leverage as well?
Well, there are too many. There are too many. Like, first one, I will say, for people here in Toronto, and you guys are starting your grassroots startups, or some of you have some already experience with your companies. Startup here, Toronto has a lot of resources, events, competitions, incubators, accelerators that can help you. I think the best resource sometimes when startups are just starting in the, their business is probably incubators and accelerators, because they are well connected. And they will tell you, how, depending on your business, who you should go with. And it's not about just the mentoring, it's also about the funding, it's also about, many other connections that can help you, to navigate this ecosystem. That, in my perspective, coming from a region that we see like more difficult to become an entrepreneur, and I really admire entrepreneurs from my region, because they have to, it's really hard sometimes because of the environment. Here, the environment is pretty much, easy to navigate. It's just there is a lot of information, and sometimes it's a little bit overwhelming to know where to start. So I will say reach out incubators and accelerators.
Tim, what tools and resources did you use that were very helpful for your company?
The Trade Commissioner's Office. And there's 170 or something like that trade commissioner offices around the world. And I just came from 2 weeks ago, the Canadian Consulate in New York. We were at the official residence of Canada in New York. There's an office there now sponsored by the CTA for us. But I can tell you this, go look and talk to the commissioner's office. It's there for a reason, and you will find an open door. What I love about Canada, so many things, but one thing is I always have a home base in almost every country you could possibly want to do business in. They will help you. They'll help you understand the culture, the country. They'll connect you. Our whole Microsoft deal all kicked off because of the CTA, and I was already a partner with Microsoft for a decade before that. So the point is that I think when you go global, there's this massive network of support out there that our country provides, and I've never seen anything like it. I think it's the most supported, robust ecosystem for all of us who provide the most jobs in the world. We're entrepreneurs, and we provide more jobs than anybody, not the big corporations. It's us, and that's where the world's going. So I love that about Canada, but the CTA and Trade Commissioner's office is
Well, stay tuned on the Trade
fantastic.
Commissioner, because you'll hear all about them a little later on that free service that they have for you guys. So, Shanghai, what's your experience in?
100% agree. The Trade Commissioner's Office is incredible. I've interacted with them multiple different countries in Europe. It started with Poland, Germany, Zimbabwe. When we held those events in Zimbabwe, the Trade Commissioner came to the event, which is incredible support. The other thing I'll say about Canada is that it is a very trusted brand. So if you can make those links with some of the formal offices, the formal government offices, it also just helps you have that credibility in foreign markets. There are two other things I would say is the accelerators like Futurepreneur Canada, who took me to the G20 summit for the Young Entrepreneurs Alliance. So something like that, where I shook hands with multiple countries, people from multiple different countries, and ultimately ended up getting contracts from there. So incubators and accelerators within Canada, that's also another great way to go. And then the last one is the embassies. So really just reaching out to the embassies and staying in touch with somebody, being connected there to see what the opportunities are and where you can sell. That's also another great resource.
May I add something there? There is also consideration. We have amazing trade commissioners everywhere. I agree with that. But they are also here in Toronto, like in every main city, I will say. We have trade commissioners from Ontario and at federal level, and they can from here connect you with those trade commissioners in other countries. So you don't have to be connecting with the trade commissioner in another country necessarily. If you are here, you can connect with your local trade commissioner.
Very good. Thank you. So I'll go back to you, Shanghai. How is your business different today than it was when you started up? And how has been Anchored in Canada supported your business?
Great question. So when the business started, the model was supposed to be traditional consulting, right? If you have a data set, we'll look at it for you, and we're cheaper than the big consulting firms. That was kind of the pitch. But then it evolved, after I did the first few engagements, the clients came back to me and said, we love the analysis that you did, but can you come and speak to our people about data science and tell us how you did it? Can you really just sit down and interpret this report that you did for us? And that's how it evolved into this data science education solutions company. And the second client was IBM, which really just took us off.
It's a good second client.
Right. So it started off as this, we're going directly to clients, etc. But even within that, we started with working professionals with IBM. They have this platform called CognitiveClass.ai that offers courses to working professionals. And we started there with that band. Then actually I saw that, look, there's a missing gap where we need to speak to a younger audience about data science, because that's where the future jobs are going to be. So then I started a high school. So going through that, yes. talk about an evolution and a pivot. But then I decided to start a high school and created this high school course in data science, and that's actually now where the business is going. So moving from that band, who my customer base were working professionals, where I think the online courses have been taken by over 350,000 people, to now trying to speak to the high schools and working with high schools themselves and not necessarily direct to students on a B2B model, where if there's a school that wants to adopt a data science curriculum, we then are able to do that.
And then being anchored in Canada.
Yes.
How is that valued?
Incredibly so, because the value of our high school data science curriculum came from it is Canadian education, right? It was rooted in the Canadian curricula. We specifically went with the IDC4U. Those of you who are in the education system will know that. An interdisciplinary course, that was really the root of why this is valuable. And the questions that came out of China, that came out of Africa were, so, you've developed this thing, is it just another course? No. It was inspected by the Ministry of Education in Canada, and that was all right.
Very good, thank you. So Tim, maybe you tell us a bit about how your company's different now than it was when you started up.
Oh, wow. Started in a basement. It was, we've got hundreds of people all over the world now, partnerships, countries. We actually do virtual retreats every quarter, where we get everybody to turn on their video from all over the world, and we'll run our, we've got a corporate coach that facilitates this, and it's just wonderful. I mean, you see all these faces from all over the world, different time zones and so forth, which is a bit of a challenge. Some people are up late at night, some people are up at 6 or 5 in the morning to work together, and we're all working together seamlessly. We actually use our own platform to do that, which is really cool. So that's, sometimes I pinch myself, like I can run the whole company from my phone. I'm like, how did we do that? So it's a lot different. We don't use email. We don't use outside IMs or anything like that to communicate. So the company's different because we invented our own way of operating, and in fact, that is the product itself. So that's huge.
Bringing innovation into a company is a huge accelerator for sure. Oh, that's awesome. And how is your business being anchored in Canada helped you?
Well, that is a great question, and when you said that, what immediately popped into my mind is Canada's like having a sail behind your business instead of an anchor. And I will let you guess which one's the sail and which one's the anchor if you're in North America. But when you go out there, you not only don't take baggage with you, you take this kind of idea of an open-minded country with you. And it truly is what makes us Canadian all over the world. So I think, beyond what we just finished yesterday, and you put all that, every few years behind you, most of that just kind of comes and goes as a natural course. But Canada is a sail, so it's brilliant to be Canadian out there and to be able to say, yeah, I'm from Canada. It's like, okay, check mark, move on. So it's awesome.
We have run out of time, but maybe Miriam, if there's like one last quick thing you wanted to leave with the audience, to give you the last word in terms of a tip or an insight that you would want to leave with them.
Yes, don't be afraid. Just do it. Go to, try to start, one thing, don't start, expanding because somebody else, you have a friend there or you have a family there. Expand just because you have done a market research and the other market is going to be good for you. So take the chance, go ahead and do it.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to being here with us today. Thank you very much.
And I echo my thanks to you, Melanie, for moderating such an excellent panel. Thank you to each and every one of you. I think one of the